Why should we bother studying animal behaviour? Well, first and foremost, because we're interested in understanding why animals do what they do. There are lots of other reasons for studying animal behaviour. Conservation biologists need to know what animals do if they're going to save them. Are those animals social or solitary? How much space do they need? And how many mates do they have? Sometimes you can't predict the outcome of research. Fernando Nottebohm started out being interested in how birds know what to sing. Yet his research eventually led to a complete overhaul of the entire field of neurobiology, a totally unanticipated yet utterly monumental effect. And this is the course textbook by John Alcock. The fact that this is in its 9th edition tells you how vast a field animal behaviour is. There's lots of new developments.
Aquaculture, the farming of fish, shrimp, shellfish and seaweeds, has been a source of human protein for nearly 4,000 years, especially in Asia. In the last decade, however, there has been unprecedented growth in aquaculture production, more than 300% since 1984, which has increased its importance in the modern food supply. It's the world's fastest growing food production activity. And globally, more than 25% of all fish and shellfish production in 1999 was attributable to aquaculture. Yet, this industry's contribution to the human diet is actually greater than the numbers imply. Whereas 1/3 of the conventional fish catch is used to make fish meal and fish oil for animal feeds, virtually all farmed fish are used as human food. Today, nearly 1/3 of the fish consumed by humans is the product of aquaculture. And that percentage will only increase as aquaculture expands and the world's conventional fish catch from oceans and lakes continues to decline because of overfishing and environmental damage.
Language is a human essence that defines human characters. Language disorder is children's disability to produce speech. 10% of children have language disability in the U.S. People cannot take it for granted and should this problem seriously. Children's language is different from that of adults, so it should be dealt with separately. Not being able to generate sentences is a physiological issue because it involves a children's psychology. In adults, it is a logical issue. To solve this problem, we need to ask questions about language itself first. We should know what language is, how language is learned, and how children can speak different sentences by words.
But Aristotle says the reason we need rhetoric is we have to be able to use it. To use rhetoric influence the ramble, we try to get them to understand truth. Truth is suggest, is different than rhetoric. Rhetoric is the dressing, is the body, right? Truth is the spirit, is the soul, is abstract. It doesn't have a body. It's not particular. If you want to get somebody to the truth, you might have to use some kind of tricks, right? Because most of people are not sound and can see the truth. That's what we think. Most people are rambles, really. Only the educated, be erudite, are actually capable of seeing the truth. If you want to get the general mass there, you may have to do a little bit. So Aristotle, that is rhetoric. Rhetoric is something that is used to influence people, right? And it's kind of mentally promised a logic. Well, there's a number of ways to think about what dimensions are. I hope we all know where 3 dimensions are, which you can say are left, right, forward, backward, up, down. And if you think about it, 3, we say there are 3 dimensions of space. And sometimes we need 3 coordinates to locate some objects in space. So you can say longitude, latitude, and altitude. So if there were more dimensions, you would need more coordinates. Now, of course, for whatever reason, we are not physiologically designed to observe those dimensions, but that doesn't mean they don't exist. One way of thinking about it is, maybe the best way of thinking about it is the way that someone named Edwin Abbott did in the late 19th century in a book called Flatland. And he said, suppose there were 2-dimensional creatures living in a 2-dimensional universe. They would have the same trouble conceptualizing 3 dimensions that we have when we try to conceptualize more than 3, such as 4. And so, he asked questions like, what would observers in this 2-dimensional universe see, say, if a 3-dimensional object like a sphere passed through the universe? And what this flatland universe would see would be a series of disks that grow in size and then decreased in size. In the same way that we can certainly think about a two-dimensional world inside a three-dimensional world, it could be that we observe three dimensions, but really there are more. And if a hypersphere, say a four-dimensional sphere, passed through our universe, we could see a series of spheres that grew in size and then decreased in size. The fact that we don't observe those extra dimensions doesn't mean they don't exist, and they are hard to conceptualize. They certainly are hard to visualize, but we can think about them mathematically and conceptually without too much trouble. I think with our linguistic training, we are also get all this invisible training to be authorities, to be the people who know. It is part of that process that you come out as a world authority on your chosen subject. But when we move into working with communities, we have to recognize that communities have to be the authority in their language. Actually, a woman in the class I'm teaching at Sydney at the moment, a career woman, expressed this very nicely. Although she was talking about something else, she was distinguishing expertise from authority. And certain linguists, because of our training, we have expertise in certain very narrow areas of language, but we don't have the authority over what to do with that knowledge or what to do with our knowledge that the community produces. I guess for me, the bottom line is languages are lost because of the dominance of one people over another. That's not rocket science. That's not hard to work out. But then what that means is in working with language revival, we continue to hold the authority. We actually haven't done anything towards undoing how languages are lost in the first place. So in a sense, the languages are still lost if the authority is still lost.
The biotech engineering has undergone 3 phases. In the first phase, people designed and made some simple machines, which aim to help people understand ourselves. And first group of people that realized we could learn from ourselves were engineers. And then, based on the studies, people began to make complicated devices in order to cure wounds, like the practice of suture, and to study physiology. This is the second phase. Later, since we went into the third phase, more complicated machines have been developed, like ECG, electrocardiography, able to have an insight of your internal body without intruding it, which can show the human brain's functions. X-ray is a good example. In an X-ray picture, you can see the bright area is the heart with some vessels around it, and the dark area is the lungs. These devices benefit humans greatly in solving health problems, such as diseases.
The comics I show you with lots of people chatting around in a room is a form of description. We use different kinds of methods to describe a situation. Sometimes we have to use visual description, particularly when we do not witness the scenario. I was born during the Second World War, and my hometown is X. For example, when I asked my mother about the war, I always ask her, "You have mentioned this or that when you talked to me when you asked her about the shelter. I asked her what the shelter looks like, and when did you go to the shelter?" From her response, I could get more visual evidence as I can to write my book.
Our civilization, which subsumes most of its predecessors, is a great ship steaming at speed into the future. It travels faster, further, and more laden than any before. We may not be able to foresee every reef and hazard, but by reading her compass bearing and headway, by understanding her design, her safety record, and the abilities of her crew, we can, I think, plot a wise course between the narrows and bergs looming ahead. And I believe we must do this without delay, because there are too many shipwrecks behind us. The vessel we are now aboard is not merely the biggest of all time, it's also the only one left. The future of everything we've accomplished since our intelligence evolved will depend on the wisdom of our actions over the next few years. Like all creatures, humans have made their way in the world so far by trial and error. Unlike other creatures, we have a presence so colossal that error is a luxury we can no longer afford. The world has grown too small to forgive us any big mistakes.
I'm a dietitian and I work in clinical weight loss research.
Accurately estimating portion size is critical in research or real-world settings. For example, if you're trying to watch your weight and you're out to dinner and you're presented with a bowl of food, there's no really good way to actually estimate how much you're eating unless you're going to whip some scales out of your bag. So we wanted to find a more objective way for people to quantify what they're eating when they're out and about. I came up with a more hands-on approach.
We got people to measure the dimensions of the food using the width of their fingers, and remembering back to primary school maths, we used the geometric volume formulas to estimate the weight of the food.
To show you how this works, I've ordered a piece of lasagna,
And that's my box, a glass of wine, and that's my cylinder, and I'm feeling pretty healthy, so I order some watermelon for dessert, and that's my wedge. So this lasagna is 7 by 5 by 4 fingers. In the future, I see this method being incorporated into smartphone applications. So you put your finger widths in, along with your height and your weight, and the app will do all of the calculations for you.
and then you've got a more accurate way to estimate the portion size.